The smell of burning pancakes filled the small kitchen as Daniel Reeves rushed to flip the blackened disc before his smoke alarm started screaming again. Behind him, a small alien girl with shimmering blue scales sat on the counter, her legs swinging as she watched with wide golden eyes. "You burned it again," little Bree said in her broken English. "Nyla says humans are bad at everything." "Nyla says a lot of things," Daniel replied, scraping the ruined pancake into the trash. "Doesn't make them true." Outside, he could hear the two older sisters arguing near the chicken coop, something about whose turn it was to collect eggs. 6 months ago, Daniel had lived alone in this mountain cabin with only his old dog Murphy for company. Now he had 3 alien princesses living in his converted barn, eating his food and fighting over chicken duties. He still was not entirely sure how this had become his life. The Vithronii had crashed their escape pod in his north field on a Tuesday evening. Daniel had been fixing his fence when the sky split open, and a burning metal ball had screamed down from the heavens. He had found 3 terrified girls in the wreckage, covered in strange blood and speaking a language he could not understand. Most people would have called the authorities. Daniel had simply brought them inside, cleaned their wounds, and made them soup. Nyla, the eldest at 19, had been suspicious for weeks. She carried herself like a soldier and watched Daniel with sharp violet eyes, waiting for him to reveal some hidden motive. Kira, the middle sister at 16, had been the first to trust him. She was gentle and curious, spending hours studying earth insects and asking Daniel questions about human customs. Little Bree had simply decided that Daniel belonged to her now, and that was that. They were princesses, he had eventually learned, daughters of some great queen in a vast alien empire. They had run away from arranged marriages, strict protocols, and a life that had felt like a beautiful prison. Earth was considered a death world by their people, too dangerous for settlement, which made it the perfect hiding place. Daniel had not asked many questions. He had simply taught them to survive, how to fish in the cold stream, how to patch a leaking roof, how to start a fire when the power went out during storms. In return, they had filled his quiet cabin with noise and life and arguments about whose turn it was to wash dishes. It was not a bad trade. "Daniel," Nyla's voice cut through the morning air, sharp with alarm. "Something is wrong with the sky." He stepped onto the porch, little Bree clinging to his leg, and looked up. His stomach dropped. The clouds were splitting apart in a perfect circle, and through the gap, something massive was descending. A ship unlike anything Daniel had ever imagined, all sharp angles and gleaming metal, blocking out the sun as it lowered toward his valley. Kira came running from the barn, her feathered crest flat against her skull in fear. "They found us. Mother found us." "Inside," Daniel said calmly. "All of you inside now." "We will not hide," Nyla said, but her voice shook. "We will not run anymore." "I am not asking you to run. I am asking you to let me handle this." The ship landed in his meadow, crushing his vegetable garden beneath its massive weight. A ramp extended, and armored figures began marching down, their weapons gleaming in the morning light. At their head walked a tall Vithronii in golden armor, his face set in stone. "I am Commander Vorn," he announced, his voice booming across the valley. "You will surrender the royal daughters immediately, human." Daniel walked forward, hands in his pockets, Murphy limping along beside him. "They are not prisoners here. They can leave whenever they want." "Then produce them." "Ask them yourself." Vorn's eyes narrowed, but before he could respond, the soldiers parted. A figure descended the ramp, and even Daniel could feel the power radiating from her. She was tall, taller than any Vithronii he had seen, with scales that shimmered like liquid silver and a crown of crystalline feathers. Her eyes were cold and ancient. High Matriarch Celira, queen of the Vithronii Dominion, had come personally for her daughters. She stopped 10 feet from Daniel and looked at his cabin, his chickens, his muddy boots. Her lip curled in disgust. This is where my daughters have been living, this hovel. The roof does not leak anymore, Daniel said. Fixed it last month. The Queen's gaze snapped to him, and he felt like an insect under a microscope. You dare speak to me, creature? You are standing in my yard. Seems rude not to say hello. He paused. Can I offer you some coffee? For a moment, the Queen simply stared at him. Then she turned as her daughters emerged from the cabin, standing together on the porch. Mother, Nyla said, lifting her chin, we are not coming back. You have no choice in this matter. You have shamed our bloodline by living among primitives. He is not primitive, little Bree shouted. He is kind. He taught me to make pancakes. Silence. The Queen's voice cracked like thunder. She turned back to Daniel. You have committed vethkari, human, the crime of harboring royal blood without sanction. The punishment is death. Daniel felt the weight of those words, but he did not step back. I did not know they were royalty. They were just 3 scared kids who needed help. Ignorance is not a defense. The Queen stepped closer. However, our laws allow for an alternative. You may face the honor trial. 3 challenges to prove your worth. Pass them and you may live. Fail and you die knowing you were given a chance. Daniel looked at the princesses. Kira was crying quietly. Nyla looked ready to fight the entire army. Little Bree was hugging Murphy so tight the old dog wheezed. He had lost one family already. He would not lose another. I accept, he said. The Queen smiled, and there was no warmth in it. Then tomorrow, human, you will learn what honor truly costs. Dawn came too quickly. Daniel had not slept, spending the night sitting on his porch while the Vithrani army camped in his meadow. Their tents glowed with strange light, and their soldiers patrolled in perfect formation, watching his cabin like hawks watching a mouse. The princesses had refused to sleep either. They had sat with him through the dark hours, none of them speaking much, just being together. Kira had eventually dozed off against his shoulder. Nyla had sharpened a knife she was not supposed to have. Little Bree had fallen asleep in his lap, her small clawed hands gripping his shirt. Now the sun was rising, and Daniel could see them building something in the meadow. A ring of stones, surrounded by Vithrani warriors standing at attention. An arena. The trial of strength, Nyla said quietly, standing beside him. You will fight Commander Vorn. I figured. He is the greatest warrior in our empire. He has killed hundreds in single combat. She paused. He will kill you. Maybe. Daniel stretched his shoulders, feeling the familiar ache of old injuries. Maybe not. How can you be so calm? He looked at her, this fierce young woman who had spent weeks treating him like a potential threat. Because being scared will not help me fight any better. And because whatever happens today, I need you to know something. What? I do not regret any of it. Taking you in, teaching you to fish, listening to you and your sisters argue about stupid things. He smiled slightly. These past 6 months have been the best I have had in a long time, so thank you for that. Nyla's violet eyes glistened, but she blinked the tears away. Do not die, human. That is an order. Yes, ma'am. The Queen was waiting at the arena when Daniel arrived. She sat on a raised platform, surrounded by advisors and guards, looking like a goddess of judgment. The princesses were escorted to a separate pavilion, surrounded by soldiers who made it clear they were not to move or speak. The first trial is strength, Celira announced, her voice carrying across the meadow. The human will face Commander Vorn in unarmed combat. No weapons, no armor. The trial ends when one fighter cannot continue or when the sun moves 1 degree across the sky. Daniel did the math in his head. About 4 minutes. He had to survive 4 minutes. Vorn stepped into the ring, removing his armor piece by piece until he stood in simple training clothes. Even without his weapons, he was terrifying. 7 feet tall, covered in thick scales that looked harder than leather, with muscles that rippled like coiled snakes. His hands ended in claws that could tear through steel. Daniel stepped into the ring in his jeans and flannel shirt. He heard Vithrani soldiers laughing. "Human," Vorn said, cracking his neck. "I will try to make this quick." "Appreciate that." The queen raised her hand. "Begin." Vorn moved faster than Daniel's eyes could follow. One moment he was across the ring, the next his fist was buried in Daniel's stomach. The air exploded from his lungs as he flew backward, crashing into the stone boundary hard enough to crack it. Pain, burning, screaming pain in his ribs. Daniel forced himself to stand. Vorn tilted his head, surprised. "You should stay down." "Probably." He charged again. This time Daniel saw it coming, tried to dodge, but Vorn was too fast. A knee to his chest, an elbow to his back, a kick that sent him spinning across the dirt. Daniel tasted blood. From the pavilion, he heard little Bree crying. "Stand up," he told himself. "Stand up for them." He stood. Vorn's expression changed. The amusement faded, replaced by something else. Confusion, maybe, or the beginning of respect. "Why?" the commander asked. "You cannot win, you cannot even hurt me. Why do you keep standing?" Daniel spat blood and raised his fists. "Because they are watching, and I will not let them see me quit." Vorn came at him again, more hits, more pain. Daniel felt something crack in his arm, his vision blurred. His legs wanted to collapse, but he had noticed something during the beating. Vorn was breathing hard. Earth's gravity was heavier than what the Vithrani were used to. Their homeworld pulled at only 70% of what Earth did. Every punch Vorn threw, every step he took, cost him more energy than it would at home. And Daniel had lived under this weight his entire life. He could not win this fight, but he did not have to win, he just had to last. Daniel stopped trying to dodge. He stopped trying to fight back. He simply stood there and took every hit, letting his body absorb punishment that would have killed a Vithrani 3 times over. When he fell, he got back up. When his legs gave out, he crawled to his feet. Vorn was sweating now, his attacks slower, his breathing ragged. The soldiers had stopped laughing. The queen leaned forward on her throne, her cold eyes narrowed. "What are you?" Vorn demanded, hitting him again. "What are you?" Daniel did not answer, he could not speak, but he stood. The sun moved 1 degree. "Enough," the queen called out. Vorn stepped back, chest heaving. Daniel swayed on his feet, barely conscious, blood dripping from a dozen wounds, but he was standing. "The trial is complete," Celira announced, her voice strange. "The human has passed." The Vithrani army was silent. They had expected to watch an execution. Instead, they had watched something they did not understand. A weak creature, a primitive being from a death world, refusing to fall no matter how many times he was struck down. Daniel felt his legs finally give out. Before he hit the ground, small arms caught him. Little Bree had broken through the guards, tears streaming down her face, holding him up with all her strength. "You did it," she whispered. "You did it, Daniel." He managed to smile through his broken lips. "Told you, maybe not." From her throne, the queen watched the small alien princess holding up the broken human, and something flickered in her ancient eyes. Something she had not felt in a very long time. She crushed it down and looked away. "Prepare him for the second trial," she ordered. "Tomorrow we test his wisdom." Kira found him in the barn that night, wrapped in bandages that she had secretly brought from the Vithrani medical supplies. Daniel sat against the wall, Murphy's head in his lap, trying not to move too much because everything hurt. "You should not be here," he said quietly. "Your mother's guards will see you." "I do not care." Kira knelt beside him, her gentle hands checking his wounds. 3 broken ribs, fractured arm, internal bruising. You should be dead. Humans are stubborn. This is beyond stubborn. This is insane. Her voice cracked. "Please, Daniel, forfeit the next trial. Tell my mother you surrender. She might show mercy." "You know she will not." Kira was silent because they both knew it was true. The queen had not come all this way to show mercy. She had come to make an example. "The second trial is Vethnara," Kira said finally. "It is a strategy game. Our people have played it for 10,000 years. The greatest minds in the Empire spend lifetimes mastering it. You will have 1 hour to learn the rules before facing my mother." "She is playing herself." "Yes, she is the finest player in the Dominion. She has never lost." Kira looked at him with desperate eyes. "Daniel, you cannot win this." He reached out with his good arm and patted her feathered crest gently. "You keep telling me what I cannot do. Maybe start telling me what I can." The next morning, Daniel limped to the arena where a strange table had been set up. It was circular, covered in hexagonal spaces, with pieces carved from crystal that glowed with inner light. Some pieces were tall and sharp. Others were small and round. Each seemed to represent something, though Daniel had no idea what. A Vithrani advisor spent the next hour explaining the rules. It was like chess mixed with poker mixed with something that hurt Daniel's brain to think about. Each piece had different abilities. The board changed shape based on certain moves. Players had to predict not just their opponent's next move, but the 3 moves after that. By the end of the hour, Daniel understood maybe a quarter of it. The queen took her seat across from him, her silver scales catching the morning light. "You accepted this trial knowing nothing of Vethnara human. Was that courage or stupidity?" "Little bit of both, probably." "Let us find out." She made her opening move, a tall piece sliding across the board with elegant precision. "Your turn." Daniel stared at the board. He moved a small piece forward, not really sure why. The queen responded instantly. Daniel moved again. She countered. Within minutes, he had lost half his pieces and she had lost none. "Your strategy is non-existent," Celira observed. "You move without thinking." "Maybe I am thinking about different things." "Such as?" Daniel studied the board, but he was not looking at the pieces anymore. He was looking at how she moved them. The tall, aggressive pieces she used without hesitation. The smaller, rounder ones she protected carefully, moving them only when necessary. "These small pieces," he said, pointing, "what do they represent in your culture?" The queen's eyes narrowed. "Family units. They are the weakest pieces but can become powerful if they reach the opposite end. And you have not lost a single one." "I am a skilled player." "No," Daniel moved one of his pieces in a seemingly random direction. "You are a mother." Something flickered across Celira's face. She made her next move, but it was slower than before. Daniel continued to play badly. He lost piece after piece, making moves that made no logical sense. But each move forced the queen into positions where she had to choose between winning and protecting her family pieces. "You do not play to win," she said, her voice tight. "You play to disturb." "I play to understand." Daniel moved another piece. "You came all this way to take your daughters back. You brought an army. You demanded blood trials, but you have not once asked them why they left." "I know why they left. They were weak. They could not handle their responsibilities." Nyla refused a marriage to a man 3 times her age who had already buried 2 wives. Kira asked too many questions about why your empire treats other species as inferior. And Bree, Daniel paused. Bree just wanted someone to play with. The queen's hand trembled over her next piece. "How do you know these things?" "Because I listen. That is what parents are supposed to do." "You are not their parent." "No, but someone had to be." The game continued. Daniel lost badly, his pieces destroyed one by one until only a few remained. But throughout the match, he had forced the queen to make choices she had never faced before. Victory or family, power or love. Again and again, she had hesitated at moves that would sacrifice the pieces representing her daughters. An ancient Vithrani in ceremonial robes stood as the final move was made. "The human has lost the game." Celira smiled coldly, as expected. "However," the arbiter continued, The trial of wisdom does not measure victory, it measures understanding. He turned to the queen with eyes that had seen centuries. He has shown wisdom, matriarch. He sees what you hide from yourself. The queen rose sharply. What is that supposed to mean? You must find that answer yourself, the arbiter bowed. The second trial is past. Daniel looked at the board, at the family pieces the queen had protected throughout the game. She had won easily, but she had revealed something she probably never meant to show. She still loved them. Under all that pride and anger and royal duty, she still loved her daughters. That was information Daniel could use. As the guards escorted him back to his barn, he passed the queen's pavilion. She stood alone, staring at the game board, her expression unreadable. The final trial is tomorrow, she said without looking at him. The trial of heart. It will not be so easy. I know. Do you? Now she turned, and her eyes were harder than diamonds. I have broken stronger beings than you, human. Whatever you think you understand about me, you are wrong. Daniel met her gaze. Maybe, but I do not think so. He limped away, leaving the queen standing among the pieces of a game she had won but somehow lost. The queen came to his barn at midnight, alone and without guards. Daniel was awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if tomorrow would be his last day alive. He heard her footsteps and sat up slowly, his broken ribs screaming in protest. She stood in the doorway, her silver scales dim in the darkness, looking nothing like the powerful ruler who had descended from the heavens. She looked tired. She looked old. Why, she asked quietly, why did you take them in? Daniel considered lying, considered giving her some noble speech about human values or moral duty. Instead, he told her the truth. Because they were scared, because they were hungry, because they had nowhere else to go. That is not a reason, that is sentiment. For humans, it is the same thing. Celira stepped into the barn, looking around at the simple space, the old tools hanging on the walls, the hay bales stacked in the corner, the blankets the princesses had piled on the floor during their first week before Daniel converted the space into proper rooms. You could have reported them. Your government would have rewarded you. You could have sold them to any number of powers who would pay fortunes for royal Vithrani hostages. She turned to face him. Instead, you taught them to collect eggs. Chickens are good teachers. They do not judge. Do not mock me, human. I am not. Daniel pushed himself to his feet, leaning against the wall for support. You want to know what I got out of this? Nothing. No money, no power, no great plan. I just saw 3 kids who needed help and I helped them. No one acts without motive. Then my motive is this. Daniel limped to the barn door and pointed toward the hill behind his cabin. 2 simple wooden crosses stood there, weathered by years of rain and snow. My wife, my son, car accident 7 years ago. Wrong place, wrong time. I spent years after that just existing, not living, just waiting to die. He turned back to face the queen. Then your daughters crashed in my field, scared and hurt and running from something they would not talk about. And for the first time in 7 years, I had a reason to wake up in the morning. I had someone to cook for, someone to worry about, someone to argue with about whose turn it was to do the dishes. Celira was silent for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was different, softer. You loved them. I love them, present tense. Daniel met her eyes. That is not something you can take back or punish me for. Whatever happens tomorrow, whatever your trial demands, that will still be true. The queen stood motionless, a statue carved from silver and starlight. Then, without another word, she turned and walked into the night. The final trial began at noon. The arena was packed with Vithrani soldiers, all watching silently as Daniel limped to the center of the ring. The queen sat on her throne, flanked by advisors, her face an unreadable mask. The 3 princesses were brought forward, forced to stand before their mother. The trial of heart, Celira announced. The final test. To pass, the human must prove his heart is worthy of the honor he has claimed. Daniel waited, wondering what challenge awaited him. Fighting he could understand. Strategy games made some sense, but how did you test someone's heart? The test is simple, the queen continued. You will choose one of my daughters to return with me. Prove that you do not hoard them for yourself and you may keep the others. This is mercy. The crowd murmured. The princesses looked at Daniel with wide, horrified eyes. No, Nyla said immediately. We will not be separated. Silence. The human will choose or he will fail the trial and die. Daniel looked at the three sisters. Nyla, fierce and proud, trying to hide her fear behind anger. Kira, gentle and kind, tears already forming in her eyes. Little Bree clutching Murphy's collar, her small body trembling. I cannot do that, Daniel said. Then you fail. No, you do not understand. He stepped forward, ignoring the guards who reached for their weapons. I cannot choose because they are not mine to give. They are people, not property. They chose to stay with me and they can choose to leave whenever they want. That has never been my decision to make. The queen leaned forward. You would die for this principle. I would die before treating them like objects to be traded. Foolish human, heart cannot be measured by stubbornness. He already showed his heart. Everyone turned. Little Bree had stepped forward, her small voice carrying across the silent arena. The guards moved to stop her, but the queen raised her hand. Speak, child. Bree walked to the center of the ring, her scales shimmering in the sunlight. She looked so small, so fragile, standing before the might of the Vithrani Empire. But her voice did not waver. You want to see his heart, mother? I have seen it every day for 6 months. When Nyla was angry and would not eat, he sat with her until she talked about why. When Kira got sick from Earth food, he stayed awake all night making sure her fever went down. When I had nightmares about the palace, he let me sleep in his room even though I kick. She turned to face the watching soldiers. He taught Nyla that strength is not about fighting, it is about protecting. He taught Kira that asking questions is not weakness, it is wisdom. He taught me that family is not about blood, it is about love. Her voice broke, but she kept going. He never asked for anything. He never wanted power or money. He just wanted us to be happy. That is his heart, mother. And if you cannot see it, then you have forgotten what heart means. The arena was completely silent. Daniel felt tears running down his face. Beside him, Nyla and Kira were openly weeping. The ancient arbiter stepped forward, his ceremonial robes flowing. The trial of heart is passed, not by sacrifice but by love freely given. The queen sat frozen on her throne, her eyes locked on her youngest daughter. Something was happening behind those ancient silver eyes, something breaking, something healing. The trials are complete, the arbiter announced. The human has won. But as the crowd erupted in shocked whispers, Daniel watched the queen, and he knew this was not over yet. The celebration never came. The trials were complete, but the queen had not moved from her throne. Her advisors whispered nervously. Commander Vorn stood at attention, waiting for orders that did not come. Daniel remained in the arena. The princesses gathered around him, none of them sure what happened next. Clear the arena, Celira finally commanded. I will speak with the human alone. The soldiers hesitated. Speaking with a primitive alone, without guards, was unthinkable. But the queen's voice left no room for argument. Within minutes, the arena was empty except for Daniel, the queen, and the 3 princesses who refused to leave his side. Celira descended from her throne, her steps slow and measured. She stopped before them, and for the first time, Daniel saw the cracks in her armor. Not the physical kind, but something deeper. The weight of a crown she had carried for too long. You have won, she said flatly. By our laws, you are free to go. My daughters may stay if they choose. But, Daniel asked, because there was clearly a but. The queen's jaw tightened. But nothing is that simple. You have made things very complicated, human. I tend to do that. Selira began to pace, her silver scales catching the fatting sunlight. There is a faction in my court, powerful nobles who have long wanted to reduce the royal bloodline to figureheads. When my daughters fled, they saw an opportunity. A queen who cannot control her own children cannot control an empire, they said. You came here to get them back, Daniel said slowly, understanding dawning, to prove you are still in control. Yes, but if I return with them now, after they have been contaminated by a death world and a human guardian, those same nobles will demand their execution for dishonoring the bloodline. The queen stopped packing, her hands clenched at her sides. I came here hopping to find them living in squalor, miserable and desperate to return. Instead, I found them happy, healthy, loved. She spat the last word like it tasted bitter. So what happens now? Nyla asked, her voice hard. We cannot go home and you cannot leave us here. What do you do, mother? Execute us yourself. Nyla, Kira whispered. No, I want to hear her say it. Tell us how you plan to murder your own daughters to save your throne. The queen flinched. It was small, barely noticeable, but Daniel saw it. The mother was still in there, buried under years of duty and politics and survival. There might be another way, Daniel said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. Your nobles think your daughters are weak because they ran away to a death world. What if we made that strength instead of shame? Selira's eyes narrowed. Explain. Earth is dangerous, you said it yourself. The gravity crushes your people, the weather is harsh, the wildlife is deadly. Any Vithrani who can survive here for 6 months is not weak. They are tough as hell. Daniel gestured at the princesses. Your daughters did not run from duty. They were sent here, as ambassadors, a special posting to study the death world and prepare for future relations. That is a lie. It is politics. Is there a difference? The queen stared at him and Daniel could see her mind working, calculating, weighing options. If I return and announce that my daughters have been on a secret diplomatic mission, she said slowly, the nobles cannot call it abandonment. They cannot demand execution, but they will demand proof. They will want to see that my daughters have grown stronger, not weaker. They have, little Bree said. I can fish now and make pancakes, and I taught Murphy to fetch. Despite everything, the corner of Selira's mouth twitched. Those are not skills valued in the Dominion, child. Maybe they should be. The queen was silent for a long moment. Then she turned to Daniel with an expression he could not read. You could have demanded anything, your survival, wealth, power. Instead, you offer me a solution that protects my throne and lets my daughters stay with you. Why? Because they are not prizes to be won. They are your kids. And whatever else you are, whatever mistakes you have made, you are still their mother. Daniel shrugged, wincing as his ribs reminded him they were broken. Families should not be at war with each other. Selira looked at each of her daughters in turn. Nyla, who glared back defiantly. Kira, who held hope in her gentle eyes. Bree, who clutched her sister's hands and waited. I have been a queen for 60 years, Selira said quietly. I have ruled with strength and wisdom, but somewhere along the way I forgot why I wanted to be strong. I forgot who I was protecting. She knelt before little Bree, bringing herself down to the child's level. It was perhaps the first time she had ever knelt before anyone. I am sorry, she whispered, for not listening, for not seeing, for making you feel like you had to run across the stars just to find someone who would let you be a child. Bree's lower lip trembled. Then she launched herself forward, wrapping her small arms around her mother's neck. Selira froze, clearly unsure what to do with this sudden affection. Then slowly, her arms came up to hold her daughter. The princesses will remain on Earth as official ambassadors, the queen announced, her voice thick with emotion she was trying to hide. And the human Daniel Reeves will be granted the title of Keeper of the Hearth. He is recognized as a guardian of the royal family. She stood, lifting Bree with her, and looked at Daniel with something approaching respect. You would have made a dangerous Vithrani human. I will take that as a compliment. It was meant as one. She handed Bree to him and turned to her guards. Prepare my ship, we leave at dawn. As she walked away, she paused and spoke without turning back. I will return for the winter festival, if I am invited. Daniel smiled despite his broken ribs. Door is always open. 3 months later, the first snow of the season fell on the valley. Daniel sat on his porch, wrapped in a thick blanket, watching the white flakes drift down from a gray sky. Murphy lay at his feet, old and tired but content. Inside the cabin, he could hear the princesses arguing about something, their voices raised in the familiar rhythm of sisters who loved each other too much to ever really fight. Life had returned to normal, or whatever passed for normal when you had 3 alien princesses living in your barn. Nyla had taken charge of what she called security, which mostly meant patrolling the property and scaring off the occasional bear. She had mellowed since her mother's visit, the anger that had driven her slowly replaced by something calmer. She still sharpened her knife every night, but now she also helped Daniel cook dinner and actually admitted when she did not know how to do something. Kira had turned the cabin's small study into a research station. She spent hours documenting Earth's ecosystem, sending reports back to Vithrani scientists who were apparently fascinated by a world that tried to kill everything that lived on it. She had started a correspondence with a university biologist who thought she was a very dedicated foreign student with an unusual interest in apex predators. Little Bree had started school in the nearby town. It had required some creative explanations about her appearance, mostly involving a rare skin condition and very committed costume design, but the other kids had accepted her with the easy grace children have for things adults find strange. She came home every day with stories about friends and games, and a boy named Peter who had called her scales pretty. The door banged open and Nyla stormed out, followed by Kira and Bree. Tell her she cannot take my book, Nyla demanded. It is a book about Earth predators. That is science, not security, Kira argued. I need to understand what we are defending against. You need to understand that not everything is a threat. Tell that to the wolf that almost ate Bree last month. It did not almost eat me, it sniffed me and left. Daniel held up his hands. Enough. There are 2 copies of that book at the library in town. Kira, you can borrow the other one tomorrow. Problem solved. The sisters exchanged looks, then shrugged and went back inside, argument already forgotten. Daniel shook his head and returned to watching the snow. A few hours later, a shadow passed over the valley. Daniel looked up to see a small shuttle descending through the clouds, its sleek form cutting through the falling snow. It was not a warship. It was not marked with royal insignia, but he recognized the design. The shuttle landed in the meadow, in the same spot the massive warship had crushed his garden 3 months ago. He had replanted since then, though nothing would grow until spring. The ramp lowered, and Commander Vorn stepped out. He was alone, dressed in simple traveling clothes rather than armor. He carried a large crate in his arms, which he set down before walking toward the porch. Human, he said by way of greeting. Vorn, nice to see you. Should I be worried? I did not come to fight. The commander reached into his coat and pulled out a small device. A communication unit. The Queen wished you to have it. She will contact you monthly to check on her daughters, though she will pretend it is official business. Daniel accepted the device with a small smile. Sounds like her. Vorn nodded at the crate. Supplies from the Dominion, foods the princesses have been missing, cultural items, a few things Kira requested for her research. He paused. And a gift for you. For me. Open it later. Vorn stood awkwardly for a moment as if there was more he wanted to say. Finally, he spoke. I have never seen anyone take a beating like you did. I have fought warriors my entire life. Champions. Legends. None of them stood up the way you did. I had something worth standing for. Yes, I begin to understand that. Vorn looked at the cabin, at the smoke rising from the chimney, at the warm glow of light from the windows. You fight like someone who has nothing to lose and everything to protect. Daniel nodded slowly. That is called being a dad. Vorn stared at him for a long moment. Then, for the first time since Daniel had met him, the commander smiled. Perhaps I will return again, to learn more about this death world of yours. You are always welcome. Just maybe call ahead next time instead of crashing through the clouds. Vorn laughed, a deep rumbling sound, and returned to his shuttle. Daniel watched him go, then dragged the crate inside where the princesses descended on it like wolves on a fresh kill. Later that night, after the alien foods had been eaten and the cultural items had been examined, and Bree had fallen asleep wearing some kind of ceremonial headdress, Daniel finally opened the gift Vorn had mentioned. It was a small box made of crystal, and inside was a medal. A Vithrani medal, carved from silver and gold, bearing an inscription he could not read. "It is the heart of the hearth," Nyla said quietly, looking over his shoulder. "The highest honor our people give to those who protect family. It has not been awarded in over 200 years. Daniel turned the medal over in his hands. "Your mother sent this." "She must have." Nyla's voice was soft. "She is not good at saying things directly, but she wanted you to know." Kira appeared at his other side. "Know what?" "That she understands now, what you did for us, what you meant by it." Nyla looked at Daniel with eyes that no longer held suspicion or anger. "That you are family." Daniel set the medal down and pulled both sisters into a hug. A moment later, a sleepy little Bree stumbled over and joined them, still wearing the headdress, Murphy limping behind her. Outside, the snow continued to fall, covering the valley in white. Inside, a human and 3 alien princesses sat together by the fire, warm and safe and home. Nyla lifted her head suddenly. "Someone is coming." Daniel looked out the window. Through the snow, he could see a small shuttle descending toward the meadow. It was unmarked, but it moved with the same elegance as every Vithrani ship. "She said she would come for the winter festival," Kira whispered. "She said if she was invited," Daniel replied. "You sent an invitation." He smiled. "Door is always open, I meant it." They watched together as the shuttle landed. The ramp lowered. A tall figure in silver robes stepped out into the snow, looking up at the cabin with an expression that was trying very hard to be stern but was not quite succeeding. Little Bree was the first to move. She shot out the door and across the meadow, crashing into her grandmother with all the force her small body could muster. High Matriarch Celira, Queen of the Vithrani Dominion, terror of 1,000 worlds, laughed. It was the first time she had laughed in 40 years. Daniel stood on the porch with Nyla and Kira, watching the Queen carry her youngest grandchild toward them through the falling snow. "Welcome home," he said. And for the first time it truly was.